Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is the Washington State EAP, and this will be the third session in our March 2025 Wellness Wednesday series. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, we are looking at grounding strategies. So, life can feel really overwhelming, especially when stress, anxiety, or uncertainty take over. So, grounding techniques can help us stay present, they can help us regulate emotions, and even regain control when we feel disconnected or overwhelmed. So, in this session, we'll explore the difference between grounding and avoidance. We'll focus on some sensory based grounding techniques, and we'll also start working on how we can develop a personal grounding ritual for our daily use. So, by the end of our session today, you should have some practical, again, science-based tools to use anytime you feel mentally or emotionally unsteady. And with that, let's get started by looking at why grounding matters. So, grounding is a technique that brings your focus back to the present when your mind starts racing or emotions feel overwhelming. It works by shifting attention away from distressing thoughts and reconnecting you with the here and now. Grounding techniques often involve sensory input, so things that you can see, that you can hear, that you can touch, or even feel. This helps calm the nervous system, reducing overthinking, and it breaks the cycle of anxiety or stress. And some common examples of grounding include touching an object with texture, so holding an ice cube, feeling fabric, um, there are sensory stickers that feel kind of pebbly that you can run your fingers over, whatever it is that you can actually touch. It also involves listening to sounds, so like noticing background music, maybe background noise if you're in a kind of noisy environment. It can even be things like sounds outside your window, so birds chirping or the wind blowing. And then we can also use movement as a grounding technique. So things like stretching, tapping our fingers, or even walking barefoot. So those are just some examples of grounding techniques that we can use. But I really want us to go ahead and dive into how to use grounding effectively and really start focusing on avoiding common pitfalls so that it becomes a helpful tool for us rather than something we kind of feel we have to rush through or don't have a good handle on. So, grounding is a powerful tool, but it's important to distinguish it from avoidance. Typically, when people say, "Oh, I'm grounding, I'm meditating, I'm thinking, I'm breathing intentionally," some people may get it in their heads that what we're actually doing is trying to avoid a problem. But grounding actually helps us acknowledge emotions while staying present and in control. Whereas avoidance means that we would find ways to distract ourselves to escape discomfort. And what that usually leads to is long-term emotional suppression, which again can activate that stress cycle that we talked about in our prior session. And that's what we're trying not to do. So just to kind of bring this um, closer to maybe being understandable or making sense for everyone, if you feel overwhelmed and take a few deep breaths to calm your nervous system, that is grounding. However, if you ignore your feelings by binge watching TV, something I myself am very guilty of, to avoid thinking about problems, that's avoidance. So, with grounding technique, we're actually focusing on something we can do to help us in that moment where avoidance is we're going to push this off and maybe we'll deal with it later. So, as you start thinking about this and start implementing grounding techniques in your daily life, to find out if it's something that's working for you that really is grounding, it never hurts to ask yourself, am I engaging with my emotions or am I avoiding them? If you're putting your headphones on to drown out the feelings you're feeling, that could be avoiding it. But if you put on music to listen and to help calm your nervous system, that would definitely be grounding. So it's just something helpful to think about. Am I engaging with my emotions or am I choosing to ignore them? So let's look at another method that we can employ. It's called the anchor points method. It is a really simple but also very effective grounding technique that helps us create a sense of stability when we are under that stress or we're feeling really uncertain about something. And unlike traditional grounding, which focuses on immediate sensory input, anchor points are personalized cues that provide comfort familiarity, and a reminder of security. And how this works is that you identify three or more grounding elements that bring you a sense of calm and stability. Those things could be a physical object, a bracelet, keychain, smooth stone. If you've ever visited me at one of the wellness and benefits fairs that we've been out to, we often give out things like worry dolls. This year I have worry dinosaurs. Again, small little things that we can hold on to. It could also be a phrase or affirmation like, I am safe in this moment. I am okay right now. It is okay to feel this way, whatever that phrase or affirmation might be for you. It could also be a familiar action, like placing your hand on your heart, taking a deep breath in and breathing. It could even be something as simple as touching the ground, maybe petting a dog or a cat. It could also be a memory or image. So something like visualizing a peaceful location, is there a place in nature that brings you a sense of peace? Maybe the beach or the forest, or for other people, it might be something like a calm, quiet museum or library. So locating that memory or image that you can call up. And when you're able to identify one or two, maybe even all three things, you can use these anchor points intentionally during stressful moments. So for example, if you're feeling overwhelmed, holding on to your bracelet and repeating an affirmation can create a sense of instant stability. I personally wear a necklace all the time, and when I feel the need to feel, I'm overwhelmed, I actually find that I tend to grab my necklace and rub it. You can also think if, maybe you're in a meeting and anxiety starts creeping in, maybe pressing your feet firmly into the ground and focusing on your breath can help you recenter your mind. So again, you found that something I can push into. And when you find that thing that works for you, it really helps to reinforce the habit by practicing it daily. So just like an actual anchor keeps a ship steady, when we use these grounding points consistently, we find that they are more effective over time. So the reason this particular strategy works is that it gives our brain a predictable calming focus during stress. Over time, we kind of find that we do it without having to think about it. It does strengthen the connection between familiar cues and emotional regulation. It is also a really powerful way to encourage self-soothing and personal empowerment. So just a little exercise for you to kind of get you thinking about it. Think of three anchor points that could work for you and then write them down. So while you kind of think about that, just to reinforce the things about the anchor point method, um, our predictability really does help calm the nervous system. So when we have that predictability, that memory that we pull up, that thing that we touch, that action that we do, it redirects our mind and our body towards our feelings of safety. Um, so it also helps create a sense of security because those are familiar cues. We learn to focus on that cue. We know it's there, and it does help strengthen the mind-body connection. So again, it helps with emotional regulation. And it also helps to influence our empowerment over our emotional states. So instead of feeling helpless during stress, an anchor point offers a practical way to self-soothe. So again, just an exercise for you to think of. Take a moment to write down three anchor points you can use as part of your grounding practice, and then keep them somewhere accessible, someplace that works for you. All right, so that is our anchor point method. Now let's look at sensory grounding. One of the most effective ways to ground yourself is through sensory awareness. Anchor points are great. For many people, those sensory grounding techniques are something we can engage without actually having to seek that anchor point, that bracelet, that necklace, that rock, whatever it is. What this does is that through sensory grounding, we're engaging our senses and it's helping us shift focus away from the distressing thoughts. And again, it brings us back to present because that's really what grounding and mindfulness is learning how to be present. So there's a few things that we can do to help us with sensory grounding. So again, those tactile focus, touching something, rubbing that sensory sticker, playing with a stress ball. Temperature change is also really, really helpful. There's the connection with the vagus nerve, which activates our fight, flight, or freeze response. But temperature change can disrupt that cycle as well and help bring us back to present. So oftentimes, if you're experiencing a little bit of anxiety, maybe some stress, and you just need a moment, taking a sip of a cold or a hot drink can help break that moment and bring you back to present. So we have temperature change. And then there's also another technique that doesn't require much from anybody. Takes about 30 seconds to do, and it's called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. Again, this is something that you can do really quickly. It doesn't require a lot of you. So if you're, in a meeting or I don't know, in a training or something, you need to help calm yourself down. The simple 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method can really help. And what that is that you identify 5 things you can see. So clock, my hands, the light, the chair, a blanket, and then identify 4 things that you can touch. So it could be the, fabric of your shirt, top of your desk, your cup, your hair, your keyboard, whatever that might be. Then you identify 3 things you can hear. So what noises around you. Then you can also identify 2 things you can smell. So maybe you smell coffee and the person sitting next to you just put lotion on, so you can smell that. And then you identify 1 thing you can taste, if possible. It could be gum, mint, your drink. If it's just after lunch, you might even be able to notice your breath. So that's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. You can do it in about 30 seconds. It's not meant to be a long practice. You can absolutely make it long if you wanted to, but really quickly identify 5 things that are around you that you can see, then identify 4 things that you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and then 1 thing that you can taste. And so those are just some examples of some sensory grounding techniques that can be really, really helpful for you in breaking that cycle and bringing us back to present. Another method that we can look at is grounding in movement. What we know is that movement-based grounding is helpful when stress makes you feel disconnected from your body or when you're overwhelmed by thoughts. What this is that physical grounding does help reconnect you with your body. It is great for stress relief when most thoughts are overwhelming. And it's also especially useful for releasing built up energy. So the key, though, is being intentionally aware. So focusing on how your body moves rather than letting your thoughts spiral. So as an example for grounding in movement, something like walking mindfully, where we focus on the feeling of our feet touching the ground. I know a person who does this by actually walking barefoot outside, not something I would do, but this is what they do. It helps them foster that connection. You can also stretch or do yoga. Even a short stretch at your desk can help because you can focus on your muscle movement, your breathing. So we're bringing our attention back to the body rather than the thoughts that might be in our head. We can even do things like tapping fingers or clenching and releasing fists. This helps us regain control when emotions feel intense. There is an actual grounding technique called tapping. There are videos out there that you can find about what it is, but it is learning intentional places on your body that you can tap that help bring you back to present. So if you ever, you're interested in that, go ahead and check out some online videos for that. I've seen a couple of good ones. So grounding in movement is another way that we can work through, grounding and bringing ourselves back into present. So we know that grounding is most effective when it becomes part of a routine. So focusing now on setting and creating a personal grounding ritual. And what those are is they are a set of techniques you can turn to when you feel overwhelmed. So there are a couple of steps that we can do for you to get started on this, that you can learn to create your own grounding ritual, something that works for you. This is something you can experiment with, with a lot of these Wellness Wednesdays. If we're implementing a new skill or technique or something to try, we always advise, try 7 days. At the end of 7 days, evaluate and reflect and see if it worked for you. And if it didn't, go ahead and find something else. If it did, keep going and maybe add on to it if you're comfortable. But to begin, you're going to start identifying a few things, starting with which techniques feel most natural to you. Are sensory based methods better movement, maybe breathing, maybe the anchor theory method is best for you. Decide when you'll use them. Are you going to start in the morning? Are you going to pull them out after stressful meetings? Are you going to maybe include them as part of your bedtime routine? So decide when you'll actually use them. And then our commitment to practice for 1 week. So to complete this, to really get this started with this exercise, just take a minute to write down one grounding technique you'll commit to trying this week. Decide when you're going to use it because we want to be intentional and start building the habit. And then, do it for 7 days. If at the end of the 7 days you found it worked for you, great. If not, start over and reevaluate something else. So that is how we can start our personal grounding ritual. And again, we want to move forward with resilience. And how do we do that? Well, through grounding, we know that it is a simple but powerful way to regain control when stress or anxiety take over. Grounding brings attention back to the present. There are multiple techniques, so you can always experiment to find what works best for you. And then being consistent matters, committing to using our grounding intentionally. So your challenge again is for a week. Find something that works for you, set aside intentional time to use it, get comfortable with it, and then reevaluate whether or not this works for you. Because ultimately, what we have to remember is that change is inevitable, but we are adaptable. By learning to use techniques that work for us, we find that we can navigate uncertainty with confidence and help break that stress cycle before it becomes overwhelming. So thank you for joining us today. Again, if you're curious about the EAP and the work we do, our contact information is there on the screen. But of course, you're always welcome to check out our website at eap.wa.gov. Thank you. We appreciate you taking the time to watch this.